Hello and welcome back to the Healthy Highlife podcast. If you're new here, thanks very much for joining. My name is Malcolm, a strength and mobility coach passionate about health, wellness, fitness, and cannabis. The goal of this podcast is to give actionable tips and dive into subjects that surround the holistic health and wellness, as well as developing the relationship with cannabis in order to help serve us rather than hinder us. Today, I'd like to go down the rabbit hole of different mindsets and pivot points and how we can acknowledge these micro moments in our days that often are these subconscious or insignificant choices and decisions we're making at any one time, which essentially are steering the nature of our day. And so the way in which we recognize these moments, or if we recognize these moments, and then what we do with that really is determined by the type of mindset that we're carrying. Done a couple of episodes diving into mindset recently, and we're going into the third part here. We're talking about fixed mindset versus growth mindsets and the difference in between, and how we can then take these mindsets and facilitate pivot points and micro decisions across your day, because ultimately these decisions that happen on a subconscious level are steering the nature of our day and the actions in which we take. So if we're falling into patterns of subconscious habitual use with cannabis, for example, we might need to recognize these patterns in order to shift them, because if we fall into these subconscious patterns around cannabis, we end up inevitably falling into some form of dependency, anything of the sort that gets the negative response when it comes to cannabis entering the conversation. The reality of it is, though, with conscious use of the plant, it's really not just a plant to get high. I've spoken about the intention and the purpose around the plant, and how if we actually pair intention and meaning behind each session with the plant, we're going to get a very different outcome and experience throughout that whole period, as opposed to what a lot of people might have, where they end up just kind of numbing out using weed. Or there's those that will use the plant and they'll get to a point of paranoia and anxiousness. But we have to remember that the plant really is just going to amplify what's inside you already. It's a bit like a mirror. And so in which case, if you get to that point, remember the plant is medicine, and if used correctly, it's going to show you what's already there. It's just going to mirror you. And so the next time you go in for a journey with cannabis, if you reach that type of point again, rather than trying to escape it or blaming the plant and say, oh, weed made me feel anxious or paranoid, how about sit and feel that and see if you can recognize that actually the plant's trying to show you something that's, or that anxiousness or paranoia has actually been sitting inside you for a long time. And actually, this is just a tool to help highlight this to yourself and bring it from the subconscious into the conscious. And so, just to that point, using the plant with that intention alone is extremely powerful to bring these things to the consciousness, because once we become conscious of these things, we can recognize the patterns that are leading to a lot of these things, and we can start to shift those patterns. And ultimately, it then pairs with a very well-rounded positive relationship with the plant, because we then use it as an ally in order to help us progress down the road, both physically, mentally, externally, internally. But what's important is to distinguish the difference between conscious use and subconscious use, because we've all been in a place where we've fallen into the subconscious use of weed, right? And it's not necessarily a bad thing all the time, but if that's where we find the majority of our habits for, or our patterns tend to fall into when it comes to the plant, then we're probably not living to our fullest potential. So when it comes to creating the conscious relationship around the plant, it can be useful to ask questions like, what am I going to do with it at this point? Why? And what am I expecting to get from that experience? Because you're then going to set your intention through those questions, and you're going to set a purpose behind the use of the plant, in which case it's not just going to be a mindless habitual tendency that happens as part of the subconscious manner. Which brings us back to the differences in mindsets. We have a fixed mindset and we have a growth mindset. And these really are at the heart of our personal development, because the mindset is really what carries us through anything. If I have a client come to me with a struggle with their fitness journey or nutrition, we could try, and the younger trainer in me would have tried to help fix the specific mechanics of that fitness issue or nutritional struggle. But the reality is, if we're not addressing the mindset of the person that's trying to address those issues, we're going to be fighting a losing battle, because we're going to then have to be trying to persuade someone whose constant default lens is to be seeking out challenges and setbacks and problems and looking for that, as opposed to looking for the solutions and the opportunities and how we can overcome things. That's the difference between being a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. We can either have the ability to seek the failures and then recognize that all of our effort was totally pointless and we just don't have it, we can't do it, oh woe is me, the world is against me, why is this happening to me? All of these type of things fall into that fixed mindset. Or we have the growth mindset, where we have the ability to see challenges as opportunities for growth. Failure is an opportunity to learn, and it's just feedback for us to then make changes into the future so that we can anticipate inevitably the same kind of breakdown again, but we'll have our way to work with it. There's always a solution. We're a problem solver rather than a problem seeker. We don't all live in one of those mindsets all of the time. Depending on the situation, the environment, the trigger, we're going to fluctuate in and out of those. But what really matters is our ability to recognize which mindset we're operating in at that moment, and then having the ability to consciously shift or choose to shift into the mindset that's going to serve us at that time. The key really lies in believing that the small things become big things, because it's the same thing that happens if you find yourself in a bit of a rut, find yourself demotivated, maybe you're not quite fulfilling your expectations and standards on yourself, maybe shit's just falling down around you, whatever. By the time you've got to the point that you've recognized that, reality is you probably missed quite a few signals along the way that were trying to tell you that things were going in this direction. And that brings us back to that point of awareness. But it also just highlights the point that we can be consistent in either direction, but if we are consistent in a negative direction, we're going to yield a negative result. Much like if we're consistent in a positive direction, we'll end up with the positive result. But just like trying to get to that positive result, and the same way we get to a negative result, it really is just a matter of a lot of little things that have compounded over time and have ultimately manifested into this big thing, to whereby it's now been brought up to us and we are aware of it. But often by the time we become aware of it, at that point, we feel like we have no idea how to change it, because we missed the trigger points or the roots that were actually creating the snowball effect previously. And so real change, when it comes to trying to change your habits or your relationship around things like the plant or your nutrition or your fitness, whatever it might be, it really happens in those small, often invisible little things that happen throughout your day. These little subconscious decisions that you're making on a second by second basis that you're not really paying attention to, because the brain is just going to distort and delete things so that we're not fatigued with decisions all day long. But that subconscious person that's driving those decisions, if we're not brought to that awareness from time to time, that can be allowed to run into all these small things in a negative direction. And ultimately, those little things make up your day, and your days make up your weeks make up your months, and so on. And before you know it, 1 or 2 years have gone by and you're like, fuck, how did I get here? Well, it happened a few years ago. You just missed the signals. So being able to spot those pivot points throughout your day and then taking the conscious action to choose to shift in that moment, that's where you take control and give yourself the power to take control of which mindset you're going to operate in. And once you can control which mindset you're going to operate in, depending on the situation at hand, then you can really start to direct the intentions and the direction of your life. For example, when you wake up and you want to scroll instead of move or study, or when a workout is feeling pretty hard and you're considering to skip the reps, skip some exercises or something like that because you're tired or whatever, when you feel the self-doubt that creeps in when you're trying to learn something new and it's like, yeah, you know, you get that little thing, it's like, maybe you should just not bother with this, you know, these little things, if you can learn to recognize those moments and take a pivotal action at that point, you're going to be able to change the direction of what would have happened, where your subconscious would have led you. Had you have woken up and allowed your subconscious to take control of your intentions in the morning without having a conscious plan, then you probably would just wake up and doom scroll. And in ultimately that case, you're going to set the tone for your day which is going to be based on some external bullshit. And you're going to be living in a reactive state off the back of some shitty post you saw or some shitty email you received from work. Either way, recognizing that moment and then choosing not to do that, because you know that if you were to do it, you would end up with a day that's probably not going to serve you. That is you taking control of your internal mindset and being able to pivot and change the nature of the rest of your day. Because taking control of the start of your day, if you can recognize these moments early, means that you have control over how the rest of your day is going to be. We all know we can't control everything, but we can control the controllables. So if we're setting up the internal headspace into a place where we can recognize these moments and we have control over the energy that we're going to carry throughout our day, we're going to be in a better place to have control over the food that we put into our mouth, the people that we choose to surround ourselves with, the information that we put into our brains that ultimately creates the narrative and the outlook and perspective on life that we might have at that time. But these aren't just habits. These aren't just little insignificant things. They're decision points in your day, because at each one of these, you have that decision to stay aligned with the version that you are becoming or that you want to become, or you can continue to stay and remain in the lane of the default and just stay as you are, in which case in a year's time you're going to find yourself going through the same old conversations with yourself a little bit further down the line. So when it comes to using cannabis consciously, notice the shift. So you're looking out for these little parts in your day. So when we're talking about the plant, we're going to think about, okay, I get the feeling I want to roll up and have a joint. All right, well, why? Notice that. Ask yourself, why do I want to do that? Do I want to do that because there's something I want to take away from that interaction with it? Or am I just using it to try and escape? Or am I bored? Am I looking for something to do when I'm trying to avoid the thing that I should be doing? Because if you can answer those questions honestly to yourself, recognize those decision points, and become aware of when you're in a fixed mindset, you can start to change the way in which you talk to yourself in those moments. And phrases like I can't become I can, and phrases like I'm not good at this become it doesn't matter if I'm not good at this because I can be good at this, or this always happens to me, instead of what could be this is happening to me and what can I take from this. Awareness is the first step though, and once you become aware of that point, the next step is to interrupt that pattern physiologically, because what you'll notice is as soon as you get that emotional reaction to that decision, once you become aware of it, you're going to notice that way before that, there was a physiological change in your body. Maybe your hands started sweating. Maybe you had a sudden rush of blood. Maybe you got some tingles in the stomach, whatever it is, depending on the situation. What we want to do is associate the feeling that we get with the change in the body. And once we've got that, all we need to do is change that. Because if we can change that physical state, stand up, take a deep breath, go for a walk, do some push-ups, splash some cold water on your face, the movement is going to interrupt that mental spiral that's happening. And then you're going to be able to realign yourself with what you want to do and where you want to take your day at that point. So bringing it back to that joint, it's like, okay, am I going to smoke a joint because I've got fuck all else to do? Yes. Okay. Well, is that going to serve me? Well, it depends. Is it a day off where I've got a planned day of fuck all to do? In which case, maybe it will serve you. But if it's one of those days where you're like, oh, you know what? I need to be getting this shit done. I'm just avoiding it. I'm just going to smoke a joint instead of doing the thing. That's going to be the problem. And it's at that point that we need to recognize it, look at the mindset we're operating in, focus on the words in which we use on ourselves, and then change that physical state, because that physical state changes the way that you're feeling, and you're able to realign with what you want to be in that moment. So instead of you then just following through with smoking a joint because you got nothing else to do when you should have been doing some shit, you're probably going to say, well, actually, you know what? I'm not going to hit this just yet. What I'm going to do is actually get that done first. And then ask yourself, what would the focused, disciplined version of me do right now? What is the version that I actually think I want to be in the future? And what would that version of me do in this moment right now? And then you take just one small, tiny little step in that direction to reinforce that meaning that you've given that situation. And that action is going to create evidence of your efforts. And that evidence of your effort is going to create belief. And that belief in yourself is going to create the confidence in you to want to go and follow through on this again. And over time, practicing little things like that will allow you to build more of that growth mindset and will actually get you to a point where you're in a state that you can spot these moments a lot quicker. And it becomes the new subconscious, to whereby your general operating system is now looking for these without really flagging up to you, because it's just doing it in the background. And that's how you can realign your mental state. Obviously, it's easier said than done, just talking about it on here. Totally get it. When it's in the moment, it's super difficult, but you have to treat yourself with grace, because realigning a relationship with anything can be very difficult. I've been on numerous calls with clients talking about how to realign their nutritional relationship, or how to come away from an abusive relationship with fitness and exercise, where people do it because they hate themselves, in which case they use the exercise as a way of punishing themselves as opposed to helping and healing themselves. That relationship, although on the surface level that looks like, oh great, you're into fitness, you must be healthy and fit and happy, but at a deeper level, if you dig into it, they're using it as a tool for punishing themselves because there's an insecurity or some form of self-hate there. And so that type of thing really gets manifested in the subconscious if we allow it to. But here, we don't need to be perfect, we just need to treat ourselves with grace, because as you put in the practice, you get better at catching yourself sooner in these moments. And like I said, it becomes part of the subconscious driving pattern. And what once would have been a 2-hour spiral into some kind of downfall now becomes a 2-minute reset, because it's just like, oh yeah, there's that shit, I'm about to go into that, right? Change the situation, take control, choose a different path. And that's your growth. That's how you can realign your relationship with this stuff or anything. But recognizing those little points, that's progress. And that's how the real change is going to compound, because it's not just, oh, everything changed and fucking life is amazing. It's, oh, wow, it actually takes a lot of time to create this change because we're trying to change you. But the reality is every day is full of little moments that shape who you're becoming. And so really actively pursuing or mastering your mindset and learning how to pivot again and again is the difference between staying stuck where you are and stepping forward. If you're still with me, I appreciate your time. And thank you. And if you have anything to add, I would love to see it in the comments down below. Or if you have any questions on it, please chuck them in the comments. I'd love to start up a discussion. Before I leave you, I'm going to leave you with just one piece. Today, try to notice just 3 pivot points in your day. And when you do, at those moments, pause, change your state, and take one action that's going to align with the version that you want to become. And that's how we change, one pivot at a time. Anyway, that was a good little joint. You see, intention. My intention with this joint was to go down a little rabbit hole. I think we did that, and hopefully you got something useful there. But remember that. Notice the pivot point, change your state and action, and that will change the version of who you're becoming. Because it's not really who you want to become, although it is a little bit, but really, remember, it's how you speak to yourself. So instead of, I want to be that person, speak to yourself as if you're already that person. Embody it. I'm already becoming that person. That action that I just took is taking me a step closer to that person that I want to be. So I'm already that person. I'm just a work in progress. And progress is progress, and that's how we move forward. So if you got something from that, I would appreciate it if you could hit the like and subscribe button and share this out a little bit. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time. Take care.